Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Reed Stow for your daily weather briefing for Thursday, March 10th, 2016. This being our third daily weather briefing, and we want to get right into it today. So, we're going to take a look at the current weather conditions across America. And we're doing a little bit of a different map resolution at this point in time, just so we can get a better idea of what's going on and see things a little bit clearer. What we've got here right now is a long frontal boundary all the way from the northeastern portion of the United States, bisecting pretty much the eastern quarter of the United States. And all along that front is a large mass of precipitation, much of it very heavy, especially from Kentucky all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico. Another batch of showers and thunderstorms out here in south central Texas, associated with the upper level low that's over Mexico at this point in time. Temperatures ranging in the east at this point, in front of this frontal boundary, are pretty much in their 70s and low 80s, pretty balmy for this time of year. Behind this frontal system, temperatures are ranging from the around 30 degrees all the way down to the 60s down into the Texas valleys. And the Rockies are looking pretty good at this point in time, and the deserts are in the low 70s and so forth, low to mid 70s. And in the northwest, we've got a storm system coming in there with scattered showers and some heavy pockets of rain, mainly just north of San Francisco at this point in time. Looking at the watch warning map, again, the highlighted weather for today is the flash flood watches, warnings, and advisories that are all out there where the rain's been falling quite consistently over the last several days that we've been talking about. There are a couple of severe thunderstorm warnings in effect in Mississippi for some isolated severe thunderstorms in those areas. Along the west coast here, we have a couple of flood advisories and wind advisories, high wind advisories for a storm system that's moving in onto the coast as it bumps up against high pressure that dominates across most of the western portion of the United States. Looking at the eastern visible satellite at 17Z, again, it's pretty clear where all the clouds are located at and where all the precipitation is associated. Strong high pressure off the east coast here is keeping most of for about southern Pennsylvania down to through Florida, through Georgia, pretty clear, just some scattered fair weather cumulus clouds, but then it doesn't go very far into Alabama and you start seeing a pretty deep deck of clouds all the way extending into the Gulf of Mexico with a nice feed off of the Gulf of Mexico. Noticing a little bit of an eddy out here. That could be enhancing some of the thunderstorm activity as it moves into this area. We'll talk about that in a few minutes with the severe weather. And then we have the upper low out here in Mexico, producing some clouds and some precipitation, along with some pretty heavy snow in the mountains out there in Mexico, which is not unusual for this time of the year, but quite a bit of snow actually. Looking along the west coast here, we have a strong stream of moisture coming out of the Pacific into the northeast. This line is decayed a little bit, not so much, as the moisture begins to get pinched off a little bit as the upper level low pushes into Canada there. A lot of bit of cold air and some vorticities beginning to move around, and so we'll start seeing some more showers increase over time. Another little disturbance coming off the Pacific here, which will be moving towards the northwest. But over the southwest, high pressure pretty much dominates, and not much in any kind of clouds or precipitation. They will be seeing some cirrus begin to overcast the skies specifically, and Nevada and portions of California later. Looking at the current radar again, we have precipitation along the west coast, scattered right now at this point, but we expect that to increase. This precipitation around the San Francisco area is associated with a frontal system that's moving in there. As this moves further to the south, we'll see it pretty much dry up a little bit as time goes on, as it bumps into high pressure. But again, the biggest picture right now is the large mass of showers and thunderstorms that extends all the way from, well, off of Boston all the way down to the Gulf Coast and into Texas. And just south of Evansville, Indiana, there's a large mass of strong showers there and heavy showers. From Memphis all the way down to the Gulf Coast, there's a strong line of showers and some thunderstorms. And there's some pretty potent storms beginning to move just north of Jackson, Mississippi. A couple of those storms have spawned severe thunderstorm warnings at this point in time. We'll look at the parameters and see what the conditions are going to look like later today for severe weather. And looking at our severe weather analysis, looking at yesterday, there was not much in the way of severe weather, and we pretty much called that yesterday, even though there was a slight risk. We thought that most of the parameters were disjointed again, like the previous day, and most of the bad weather was going to stay off the Gulf of Mexico. If anything, there was going to be some stuff along the coast here. But most of this activity happened early in the morning. The rest of it was just heavy precipitation and rain at this point in time. And speaking of rain, they're actually going to be expecting close to about 10 inches of rain over here near the New Orleans area, where there's going to be some serious flooding. There's already been serious flooding taking place in Arkansas and Louisiana and portions of Texas and Mississippi. Today's severe weather outlook, we have a marginal risk of severe weather from Jackson, Mississippi, or northern Mississippi, all the way through most of Louisiana into the coastal regions of Texas here. And then a slight risk of a general risk of thunderstorm activity that surrounds that area that backs all the way into around Oklahoma and portions of Alabama. Um, Really don't think there's going to be a huge severe weather risk today, but let's look at some of the parameters here. We're looking at the dew points associated today. And again, the Gulf of Mexico is open for business here. Nice little low pressure system just south of Houston here may spark some good thunderstorms later today across Louisiana and portions of southern Mississippi. The dew points are high enough to be in the mid to upper 60s and 70s here. A lot of moisture just sitting off the coast here and inward. A lot of moisture extending all the way up to the northeast with dew points all the way into the mid 50s and low 50s up in the along the New England coast there. And the dew points are beginning to come up along the eastern coastlines too. As we saw, this area was a little bit drier yesterday, but quite a bit of moisture is beginning to move into the areas. So that's the reason why we're seeing a lot of the fair weather cumulus showing up here. Looking at the CAPE values, or the convective potential energy, again, not a lot of instability. There's a few pockets here and there, and most of those values are below 250 joules per kilogram. Most of the instability, again, is out here in the Gulf of Mexico. It'll be interesting to see if this upper level low, if it holds together. We'll be able to pull some of this moisture up a little bit, or some of this instability up. We have some values here around 750 joules, and being, again, this is in the springtime, that is sufficient for some severe weather. So again, I think kind of like yesterday, people along the coast here of Louisiana, Mississippi, and maybe even into Mobile need to be on the lookout as thunderstorms begin to move into the area. They're going to be pretty potent coming off the coast there, or coming into the coast. Again, as they move into a little bit more stable air that's quite saturated but not quite as unstable, those thunderstorms will become a little more elevated and not quite as severe, although we could expect maybe a possible wet microburst or so. But I think most of the severe weather, again, is going to stay along the coastal regions. Again, inhibitions here, convective inhibition, again, there's still quite a bit along the coast here and inland, so that's going to be a preventing factor against some of those thunderstorms. Shear is not really a value. When we look at storm relative helicity, helicity is quite strong across southeastern portions of Arkansas, northern Louisiana, and a great portion of Mississippi here. So any storms that can seem to get down to the surface here have the potential for rotation. The question is how much can they get in there? I doubt there's going to be much clearing skies later today, so it's going to be a little difficult to get these storms. We've had strong helicity values before, but it just hasn't produced anything the last couple of days. Moving along to the EHI values, which is a combination of instability and helicity. Again, most of the higher values, which are into the 1s, 2s, and 3s, are in the Gulf of Mexico. They're kind of skirting along the coast there. We'll see if this upper level, or this surface low, can pull some of that northward. But again, I don't think there's anything as far as a significant tornado threat. Looking at the significant tornado parameters, again, values are pretty decent around New Orleans. They're not super high. The stronger values obviously are off the coast there, quite a bit into the Gulf of Mexico. So there is a possibility maybe a storm or two could produce an isolated tornado or so. You always have to keep that open, especially during the spring months. Expect the unexpected when it comes to thunderstorms, as some people have said. So you just never know. We just have to keep an eye on this throughout the day. Looking at the supercell composite, again, the values are not super high. Most of the values are out in the Gulf of Mexico, but that's going to continue the flow of thunderstorms in the area. And looking out at around 23Z, looking at the HER model forecasted radar, again, a lot of precipitation, and quite a bit of it heavy. So any of these areas really have the potential for flash flooding, and then a lot more precipitation building back here in Texas. This may be a little overdone a little bit, as we've got some drier air in here. But definitely along the coast here, there's a good potential for showers and heavy thunderstorms. What's a little interesting here about this model is we've got a little bit of broken activity down here. So if that becomes the case, then the likelihood of some severe weather could take place with some of these thunderstorms. So trends will definitely need to be watched, as well as satellite trends here. Looking at the winds aloft at the 925 millibar, again, we have a decent little surface low out here around Houston. A strong low-level jet, winds pushing close between 45 and 50 knots, all the way up to another little low-pressure system around Memphis, which is enhancing the upper-level jet there. Again, good influx of moisture coming in, no doubt about that. Looking at the 850 millibar level winds, again, kind of unidirectional here, very strong winds. The winds are slowing down a little bit here off over the Gulf of Mexico, so that may give us a better indication if we might get some breaks in those clouds and in some of the precipitation, as maybe some dry air is kind of getting trained into some of this moisture flow, as the upper level still kind of stays pretty far away. Looking at the 700 millibar level, and this is the level in which we look at where thunderstorms tend to travel. Again, pretty unidirectional, so we get a lot of training over the same areas for precipitation. So really from about Mobile, Alabama, all the way over to New Orleans, mostly in the New Orleans area, all the way up to Jacksonville, to Memphis. That's really going to be the key area for really a strong band of heavy precipitation and flash flooding today, as the upper level low continues to remain stationary. Looking at the 500 millibar level, winds have increased a little bit in this area and expanded out. Again, a good outflow here, a good defluence aloft, which is going to continue the upward motion of these showers and thunderstorms over this area. Not super strong, as winds are mostly around the 60 to 70 knots. That's the stronger winds. There's a little bit of a jet max coming in below that. That may enhance some of these thunderstorms along the boundary there. We'll have to watch those. But again, I don't think it's an area that's really conducive for severe weather, since the surface features are kind of weak and the upper levels feature is pretty far away. And then looking at the 300 millibar level, again, the winds aloft, again, there's a good decent venting aloft of these showers and thunderstorms, but the stronger wind jet max is pushing into southeastern portions of Texas. So these thunderstorms, though they're going to continue to build and so forth, they're more on the anticyclonic side of the jet than they are on the cyclonic side of it. So again, I don't think the values for severe weather are going to be quite high enough. Again, a strong jet coming into the northwest, we don't want to ignore that, which is going to continue to enhance the showers and so forth coming into the northwest. Looking at aviation weather, we do have convective segments in effect for thunderstorm activity between 45 and 46,000 feet, located over western portions of Mississippi and most of southern Louisiana. There are no convective segments for the eastern portion of the United States, and most of the Intermountain West. There is a chance for some thunderstorms with the upper level low that's coming in along the western Oregon coast and portions of western Washington. So we'll see some thunderstorms associated with the cold air aloft moving in there. Turbulence at this time, we're showing turbulence of between about 23,000 and 36,000 feet, moderate turbulence there. I would expect some turbulence along the west coast here eventually, and turbulence to increase with thunderstorm activity as time goes on down the road. And again, icing at this point in time, because there's so much warm air in the atmosphere, there's not any icing segments valid at this point in time. However, we may get some icing along the west coast and again at the upper levels with thunderstorm blow off. Now looking at the 5-day outlook here, looking at today at 18Z, the upper level low is still parked over most of Mexico, with different bands of vorticities moving around that. If you look at where the heavy flooding is taking place, the vorticities are kind of weak, so we don't have a lot of upward motion, although there is some. It's not extremely strong like there is down here by where the upper level low is, and therefore when you look at the precipitation at the surface level, the precipitation obviously is going to continue to be enhanced, though, as these little surface lows move along the frontal boundary. But the intense upward motion is going to stay away from where the precipitation band is at this point in time. This is going to be mostly enhanced by a low-level and mid-level jet that's enhancing this precipitation. Again, strong storm system coming into the northwest coast. A lot of precipitation going to be associated there with some cooler temperatures aloft coming in. We'll start to see a little bit more snow in the mountains in the northwest there. Looking at Friday. Now, Friday, I'm not sure I totally agree with this mapping, so to speak. The GFS wants to bring this up into Texas, and I think it's going to be a little bit slower at this point to move out, but we'll go with this for now. If this is the case, it's showing a little bit of intensification of this upper level low, which means we might get a little bit more vorticities spinning out from this, which could enhance some of the thunderstorm activity, make it a little bit more intense as it goes. Another strong disturbance is going to be coming down the west coast here, which we need to keep an eye on, which yesterday, when we looked at the surface map, showed hardly any precipitation associated with it coming down, but now it's begun to pick up on the aspect that it's got a little bit more punch to it than what it originally had, and has quite a lengthy moisture feed all the way back to Hawaii. So the as it's gotten into more of the upper level air mapping of the United States, we're getting a little bit better readout on what it's going to provide. But looking at the surface here, again with our main low over Texas, we're getting kind of more of a banding look towards this system as it begins to eject out and being kicked out by the upper level low that's coming into the west coast. And then high pressure pretty much dominates the northern tier of the United States, and the Midwest and Northeast will be clearing out as the upper level system moves out of there. Looking at Saturday, we have a double barrel low here. We have the upper level low moving into mostly Oklahoma. It is negatively tilt, and we do have some stronger vorticities showing here. Now, at this point in time, SPC does not have any severe weather outlooks in place here, but I think we will see a possibly a greater opportunity for severe weather as this system is a little bit more dynamic as it pushes out, even though it's beginning to wane a little bit. I still think some of these vorticities will enhance some of those thunderstorms, so we need to keep an eye on this on Saturday and Sunday. Definitely a very strong system coming into the southwest here that bears watching it down the road as it moves into the same area as the other upper low is, but it will help kind of push things along here as time goes on. Looking at the surface chart here, again, the northwest is going to be pounded again with precipitation, and again, definitely more snow in the mountains there as some cooler air begins to push into the northwest. Some precipitation now beginning to finally show up, like we talked about yesterday in the southwest there. I think there'll be a little bit, possibly a little bit more. We'll have to look at the precipitational values here, but that's a pretty strong upper level trough there, and I think it'll try and push some kind of precipitation out even more so down maybe into the central and southeastern portions of Arizona. Again, I think we'll begin to see, even though it's showing some of this precipitation beginning to wane a little bit here in the southeast, I do think we'll see more intense storm systems, thunderstorms, than what this is really picking up on. We'll have to monitor this, but we'll keep an eye on it. Looking at Sunday, this strong upper level low has now absorbed the Mexican low at this point in time. It's still pretty intense here. Again, the northwest is being hit pretty hard by another strong disturbance coming on to the northwest coast. So as we look at the surface chart, again, a lot of moisture moving into the northwest from Washington all the way to about San Francisco northward. Southwest remains kind of clear at this point in time. Now, this upper level low and this surface low now that's centered, it's over Oklahoma. It's showing here that this all the moisture is going to be shunted off towards the east here. I think this is not really handling things well. There's a ton of moisture that's going to be at the surface here that this strong upper level low that could work with. If this had been dry out here, I would say, yeah, there's no precipitation, but the sky should be clearing out and should maybe actually have a couple of days of drying out. But I think that we're going to see a better chance for thunderstorm activity here, from Mississippi through Alabama into Georgia. Up here, I don't think quite as much. I think this might be a little bit more overdone, per se. I mean, we'll have to see. The upper level low that was in Mexico is going to be moving up here, but I think it's going to be more the energy is going to be brought back here. So I'm not sure I completely agree with the GFS. We'll have to monitor this as the days go on and see what happens Sunday. But I think there'll be a higher risk of severe weather than what we're showing at this point in time. We'll have to monitor that. Looking at Monday, on the upper level side, we have a strong disturbance now kind of coming out of the Canadian prairies here. So we're going to see an injection of some colder air coming down. And this trough, a little bit more potent than what we've seen on previous models here. We've shown here in the past that this was not quite as strong. It's a little bit stronger. So again, I think there's going to be a little bit more potential here down the road for some severe weather. There's a lot of moisture and heat sitting along here East Coast, and I think there's going to be a greater potential for some severe weather, especially along from around Virginia south towards Florida. In the west, a lot of energy moving into the Pacific Northwest, off the Pacific here. If we look at the surface chart, the Intermountain West will begin to see some quite a bit of precipitation, especially in the mountain aspect of snow, especially along the Sierras in California. The south and southeast portion of the United States will begin to dry out. The southwest will continue to remain dry, and the eastern portion of the United States will remain quite unsettled here. I'm not sure I agree with this surface depiction at this point in time. I think there'll be a stronger surface low somewhere in here than what the charts are showing here, but we'll continue to monitor that for Monday. And again, I think there'll be some kind of a severe weather potential along the East Coast here. And then finally, looking at Tuesday, our last day, surface-wise or upper level wise, we have a pretty strong upper level low that's coming into the northern tier of the United States with a broad jet stream, really, and some pretty good defluence here beginning to show up in the upper Midwest regions. Looking at the surface charts, there's not a lot of moisture being returned from the Gulf of Mexico, as most of it's been shunted off by the upper low that came across. Now, it's interesting, the upper level low that was coming down on Monday is being shunted off towards the northeast and not combining with this upper level low coming off the eastern coast. We'll have to monitor that to see if there's any kind of combination that takes place there. If this upper level low, and I think part of that's because they're thinking this low is going to dig far in the south, that's going to push that upper level out. We'll have to see and monitor this. We're still about 5 or 6 days out, and a lot of times the models just don't handle those days very well. Either way, we have a pretty potent surface low that's moving into Iowa with a lot of precipitation there. But they're saying that the temperatures are still warm enough that most of this will fall as rain, but quite a bit of snow falling down back in the Intermountain West. And quite breezy too. There's going to be a lot of breezes up ahead of this as the gradient gets pretty tight here. We'll have to monitor this these next several days. The activity is going to continue to remain strong, and systems will be continuing to come in across the Central Plains. We are into the start of the tornado season, so I would expect over the next couple of weeks we'll begin to start seeing some systems digging down that might cause us more of a potential. We'll have to monitor these systems, but we'll keep you advised. We thank you for watching today. Have a great day.